finally did it. We finally got the new garden done, and it was a job, to say the least. I am thankful for my husband who was here to help me through it all. It was quite the experiment. For just a small garden space, you would be very surprised as to how much work goes into it. I remember when we did our current garden space, how we actually had to move a walkway. There was a walkway where last year's garden space is, and so we took that walkway and we had to move it over to make the walkway straight, and then we made our new garden area. So the kitchen garden did really well last year, and we knew we wanted to expand that this year, so we doubled that space. But then we realized that we had this unused yard space on the other side of the walkway, and it was a great opportunity to use that space to grow a garden instead of lawn. The issue is that that yard space has been so trampled on for so many years because of various project dumps that we've done there. There's been dirt dumped multiple times there. There's been you know, a four-wheeler going back and forth over top of it. So the soil was extremely compacted, and we knew that that was going to require some tilling. You know, you could always start trying to build that soil with cardboard and then manure and wood chips, but we just didn't have time for that. So we went ahead and we tilled it up. First day we tilled it up, it was really hard. We might as well just forget about it. But this weekend it rained, and we thought, well, maybe it'll be a little bit easier to till it up when the soil's wet. And we did exactly that. It was a lot easier to till up the soil while it was wet. We got to see just how fertile the soil was underneath, even though it had been so compacted. It was actually really nice soil. Now here in Virginia we have red clay mud, and a lot of people think that that's just this horrible thing to have, but it's actually not. Red clay helps hold in the moisture, so especially when you're going into a drought season, red clay is essential to hold in that moisture and for your garden. So the garden space is doing great. We took the time to till everything up. We went ahead and put a rock perimeter around it like we do in most of our garden spaces. It kind of helps outline everything and keep it all in order and gives it that organization look that you want for curb appeal. But other than that, I thought about leaving the garden space just flat and mulching it all because that would have been easier, right? Well, the reality is that we live on a hillside, and so what's sometimes easier isn't always the best efficient way to do it on a hillside. I decided to go ahead and make 3 large market rows in the garden. They're referred to a lot as market rows because you can fit, you know, 3 or 4 seeds wide depending on what you're growing, and then they're very long rows. The 4th row is not technically a row, it's just kind of the leftover raised area in the garden space. I left that flat for my peas. I'm gonna try to grow a lot of peas over in that 1 row area, and those peas can grow up the fence line. We will put a fence around the entire perimeter of that garden space so that it keeps the chickens out, keeps the rodents out, and helps as a barrier where we can actually grow vertically instead of horizontally. After we created our rows, we decided to mulch everything with just regular old mulch. Mark is a landscaper, and so he normally has a lot of mulch left over from certain jobs. If he doesn't have any left over, he gets good discounts. So we went ahead and mulched that garden space. It took a lot of mulch, guys. It takes a lot of mulch to do a small space. So if you have a much bigger space, you can opt for dirty wood chips, or you can just do straw, or you can go ahead and put down weed barrier, which is something that I'm considering. So right after we made the garden space, Mark had asked me, he's like, why did you do rows, you know, this big and this wide? And I said, because I don't want to plant seeds and then have a big rain come and just push all the seeds down the hillside. I've had that happen before. Last year in this garden, before we created a barrier in front of it, we had a big rainstorm come right after I planted my lettuce, and all of that rain rushed down the hillside and took all of my lettuce with it. For that reason, I have lettuce popping up and all over the place this year in that garden, and I have lettuce popping up down in my yard, even down the hillside, just random places from the seeds that got carried with the storm. So funny enough, after we finished after we finished putting together the rows and mulching the rows, we headed to town. And as soon as we drove out of the driveway, a huge storm came. We were actually under a tornado warning. That's how bad the storm was. There was hail, there was a downpour of rain and some wind, and I thought, oh, all of that new soil is gonna be down the hill if my theory doesn't work. Well, thankfully we got back home after the storm and my theory had worked. The mulch was actually washed down the hillside a little bit from the walkways, but the rows were perfectly intact. So this theory and method works great if you're living on a slope or a hillside. Now, we have a sloped area in the front. Our backyard is a drop-off hillside, and so that would work better with the same method or terracing. You could terrace or different types of gardening methods with that, but for a sloping area, make sure that you're doing your rows along with the drainage of water. So had I have made my rows horizontally rather than vertically down the property, it would have washed over those and come over top of the rows. But because I was able to divert water, because I did my rows vertically up and down instead of like this in the yard, the water found its way down and kept going down the hillside. So rather than having to go over rows, it channeled out through all of those pathways, which is exactly what I wanted it to do, and it saved all of those rows. Think if all of those rows had seeds in them, it would not have been good. All of my seeds would have gone away if I had planted the wrong way. So we're calling for rain most of this week. We needed the rain, so I'm not gonna complain. But you know, when you finally get stuff in order and the garden space is done, you wanna plant food. I'm gonna try and plant some lettuce, extra peas. I'm gonna get all my tomatoes and peppers and the rest of my herbs in the ground. This week, we are just gonna take that chance and see what happens. I think most of the storms are not gonna be very severe, but it's actually really great to plant during the rainy time, because if you've noticed in a garden, as soon as you plant something and as soon as it rains, all the weeds sprout up. Every vegetation in your garden is enhanced. And that's kind of what I'm running into right now with my garden from last year. Last year's garden, we didn't have a lot of issue with weeds because it was a fairly new garden space. But this year, the garden space is established and weeds do grow on top of mulch. And that's the issue that I've run into this year, is weeds growing on top of mulch. So what my plan is, probably next week, this weekend or next week, we have some leftover garden paper, weed barrier, and I think I'm gonna cover at least part of last year's kitchen garden in weed barrier. I'm not a huge fan of weed barrier, but I've got to choose between being a fan of something and the convenience and time that I'm gonna put into it. And I am literally weeding one piece of that garden space every single day just to keep on top of the weeds, and I just don't have the time to do it. So I'm gonna take the convenience of modern gardening and put down weed barrier all throughout that garden space and mulch it on top, and hopefully that will help keep things at bay just a little bit. Besides gardening, we finally got our first batch of Black Copper Maran eggs. Now, they're not as dark as I had hoped that they would be. I knew that they wouldn't be as dark coming from this certain breeder, but he assures me that a lot of his offspring throw really dark eggs, and so we're gonna try it. If nothing else, we can sell some of the offspring for a discounted price. But we do have another batch that's coming from out west, and I'm excited to see that once we get it. Supposedly her line is a lot darker, and she line breeds, which means she doesn't add in new lineage of birds to her flock. She just keeps line breeding, so she'll continue to just hold back the darkest eggs and breed those darkest eggs. Whereas some breeders will actually have a flock and then get a flock from a different line, which is perfectly okay. But then you run into some genetic issues when you try to cross over those Maran lines. So you could take two really dark egg layers from different lines and put them together and not get a very dark egg, depending on their genetics. So with line breeding, it ensures that every generation of dark egg that you're holding back just keeps getting darker and darker and darker, rather than taking that chance and having two separate lines and putting them together. Now we are doing 2 separate lines because I want to hold back the best of the best. Now we are leg banding these because our ultimate goal is to sell as breeding stock, but also just for our egg customers. And so I'm excited about that. It's a project, it's a 3-year long project, I'm guessing. This year we're hatching, our stock will start laying the beginning of next year. We'll hold those back. And then in the fall, which I'm really excited about, we are gonna be adding some lavender Americanas from really great bloodlines. As long as everything goes well, we will add the lavender Americanas probably in September, October, November time. I'm not excited about hatching eggs in the beginning or towards the end of fall, but I had to get them when they're ready, and they're not going to be ready until fall. So our ultimate goal is to weed out the flock that we currently have. We have leghorns, we have chickens that we have hatched ourselves, which we'll keep them until the day that they die. But the leghorns I'm weeding out. I like my leghorns. I'll probably keep a few of them just for laying purposes, but I'm not really looking for a hardcore egg layer in our flock. I'm more concerned with egg color, heritage type breeds that I enjoy, and the ability for breeding. So our goal is to have the French Black Copper Marans, the Americanas, our olive acres, and our few leghorns that we have left over run all together in one flock. This will save us from having to actually put aside breeding pens, which I don't have time to keep up with, nor do I have the finances to put together multiple breeding pens. So what will happen is we'll hold back lavender Americana hens and French Black Copper Maran hens, and then we'll have 2 French Black Copper Maran roosters once our current rooster goes away. Bo, our current rooster, he is old and he has a limp now, and so I can tell he's got some type of arthritis or muscle inflammation, so I'm not quite sure how much longer he'll be with us. But our ultimate goal is to have the Marans and the lavender Americanas. That way when we collect the Maran eggs, we know that they're purebred Marans with just the 2 BCM roosters. And then when we collect the lavender Americana eggs, we know that we're going to get pure olive eggers, because the cross between the Americana and the Maran will give you an olive egg. So we're able to run our entire flock together after this 2 to 3 year time period, and then eventually offer quality stock to other people. So that's what's happening around the homestead this week. I hope you enjoyed this video. We have some more videos coming up. I'm actually going to start doing more informational videos rather than just the updates. I know you have some tidbits of information in these videos that you can kind of glean from if you're trying to get a garden started or learning about chickens or herbs. But I need to do some more educational videos, so I have a few videos coming up for you. And then of course we're going to show you the incubation process with our new incubator and the chicks as they hatch, and how they grow and the breeding process. If you haven't picked up a copy of my new book yet, I would love for you to. If you already have gotten it and you've read through it, please go ahead and consider leaving a review either on barnesandnoble.com or amazon.com, or both. I really enjoyed writing this book, and I'm so encouraged by all of the feedback that we've already gotten. A lot of people are taking control of their health care. You take control of your food, why not take control of your health care? So check it out. Go to my website. You can get a signed copy, or you can order it from Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any other bookstore. And if you haven't already, consider asking your local library to carry it, and we'd be happy to send them a book. If you haven't checked out the 2018 Homesteaders of America Conference yet, I encourage you to. You'll learn a lot of information from other homesteaders across the United States, as well as experts and pros who have been doing this for decades. Go to homesteadersofamerica.com to check it out. Hope you guys have a great day. Happy homesteading.